So, um, as I mentioned, welcome everyone to the monthly edition of the Cloud Office Hours for the month of September. The topic this month is Power BI, but as always, right, after we present the topic, if you have any other sort of strategic or interesting Office 365 questions, concerns, or issues, feel free to bring them up when we get to the Q&A section at the end. Um, the agenda for today, about 30 minutes to talk about Power BI, a quick presentation. I know I'm an ex-Microsoft guy, so normally I would want to do 175 slides, but I promise that's been beaten out of me since I left. So just a few slides, and we have Kai Anderson on to do what I think is a great demo to show you how quickly you can get up and running on Power BI. And then handle any of your questions. Then we'll turn it over to open mic. And like I said, often the first questions are around the topic of the day, but all questions are welcome. We're here to help you through your issues and concerns. So this is our You Already Own It, part of our You Already Own It program. Your team is myself, Bob Ballard, Jerry Martin as well. Mary Tucker helps us administer the program, and as always, our Vice President Steve Winter this is part of his vision, so we'd like to thank him. One thing to make sure too, by the way, and obviously, we love when you guys join these calls, and that's a big part of the program. But you also have access to our subject matter experts on a variety of topics. Feel free to email them at any time at youalreadyownit@goplanet.com, go-planet.com, and ask questions. Particularly like them to be about features, functionality, strategy, etc., as opposed to this isn't working. But really, whatever you need help with, we're happy to oblige. So I have Kai Anderson with me today. He is applications and data engineer here at Planet. Jerry's traveling today, so he won't. He's on, but I think he's in the airport, so he won't be speaking today. Today's topic is Power BI. So just a couple of framing slides. I promise this won't be a sales presentation. We're going to get into the nuts and bolts. So what is Power BI, right? It's a software as a service from Microsoft, available in a number of flavors. We're going to break that down because that's where a lot of confusion is. And it takes 5 seconds to sign up, or in fact you may already be signed up if you have an Office 365 customer, and in 5 minutes you can be doing really important stuff. And I don't normally say this. We all love the sales pitches. Hey, in 5 minutes you can be doing amazing things. But Kai, I think, is going to show you. It was important to me to show you just how easy it was to do. So instead of say making this super complex set of dashboards, etc., we are literally going to walk you through what it takes to connect to a couple of data, do some visualizations, and publish them. Right, so you'll see in the course of a 15-minute demo, we'll have multiple different pieces of data analysis. Right, there's a large BI ecosystem. Of course, Planet is one of them as far as an implementation and SI partners, but also ISVs as well that integrate Power BI into their applications. It's really becoming, since Office 365 is the de facto standard in the enterprise today, Power BI is becoming among that as well for leveraging third-party applications. Great story around integration across Microsoft products as well. So what are some of the key differentiators? There's a ton of pre-built dashboards and reports for all kinds of popular solutions that are already there, right? So it's one thing, and we're going to show you how you take data that isn't from solutions that aren't already sort of put together. That'll be the genesis of our demo today. But there's pre-built reports and analytics on tons of third-party and Microsoft solutions that are out there. Live real-time dashboard updates, right? So not only can we build reports, but we can have, dashboards that executives and others can see real-time information on. We can connect to tons of different data sources. I want to talk about that in a second. The ability, to get insight and intuitive data and explore around, right? So these aren't just static reports. I think Kai will show you that, but the ability to drill down and look at the data, right? In my in my newsletter that I sent out, I called it the democratization of data, and I know it's kind of corny, but it really is. It's about getting data out to users that look at it differently than some people in IT might have thought about looking at it. And that's really the important part about Power BI is that you can take some data that exists in the organization and say it would be great if how that looks against some publicly available data to compare demographics or other things that are out there, and we'll see some examples of that. And think about looking at the data and building a report in a totally different way, right? So when we think about Power BI, we have the ability to sort of take and publish data sets, right? So, think about kind of roles that things play. Well, while Power BI can absolutely be delivered as an enterprise service and completely orchestrated by IT, it also can be really published and made available for the power users in your organization. We're going to see how easy that is to use. But from an IT standpoint, we can take these enterprise data sets and publish them and make connections to them and say, hey, here is these kinds of data that we have in our organization ready for you to take a look at and maybe combine and correlate. And oh, by the way, really quickly, you can take some other things that are out there and combine them together to have a totally different view, right? So to create reports, visualizations, ultimately deliver live dashboards, right? The other thing that's really important, I mean, this thing connects to this thing connects to a number of data sources. We're going to have a bunch of different options, everything from obviously your enterprise data warehouse if you have one, to information publishes on the web. I think we actually are even going to potentially today look at tables that came from a PDF file, right? So the ability to really connect to tons of different data sources, both cloud-based, on-premises based, it doesn't matter, aggregate them and analyze the data. Um, Very powerful. So, the engine that drives this thing as far as building these solutions is the Power BI desktop. We're going to see that in our demo today, and that's where you do the preparation. You can start doing the exploring, create these reports, and share them out. We'll show this across. I think a big part of this is not only can I take reports and publish them in a canned way, but then people can then take those reports and add their own layers to them and analyze them further, and that's really, really powerful. So where all the questions come in, right, is okay, so, what's free? What do I have to pay for? How does this all work, right? So um, there's the free version of Power BI that's available to everyone, right? Um, and that allows you to sort of do some of these things from a personal view. And I have some slides that break this down more. The designer piece of this comes from Power BI Desktop, and for that to connect, that requires that you have Power BI Pro. Now, there's a lot of ways to get that. If you're not even an Office 365 customer, you can buy it standalone, and you can add it to your Office 365 subscription. Or if you have the premium SKUs like E5, G5, it's already included in your solution today, and so you have full access to that. And then, if you're taking it to the next level and you want to sort of go even beyond and have, significant, powerful, integrated enterprise, large scale experience, you have the ability to even take that one step higher and go to Power BI Premium. So if we look at the difference between free and pro, right? With the free solution, you can publish to the web and you can connect up to 70 plus data sources, right? And it's really about, you sort of looking at the data and analyzing it from a personal perspective. You want to start doing things like sharing these reports, publishing dashboards, allowing people to also collaborate on the data and leverage the Power BI desktop, which you'll see how powerful that tool is when Kai does this demo. You're looking at upgrading to Pro, whether that be through E5 licensing or targeting some users as an upgrade. Many of our customers, so one of the things I like to do on these calls, and happy for those that are on the call and are Power BI customers, when we get to the the interactive section at the end, feel free to speak up, right? And talk about your experience, but many of our customers are leveraging Power BI Pro in pockets within their organization today. I know this this slide in particular is a bit of an eye chart, and I'm not going to really, get into the details. If anybody wants this presentation, I have attached it to the Skype session, so you're happy to download it. I'm also happy if anybody sends an email to this meeting request. I'm happy to send this along to you as well, so you can sort of see this. But it breaks down sort of what some of the restrictions and additional benefits you get when you step up to Power BI Premium. One of the major differences is the ability to publish. I have no limits on the amount of data or the scale or performance. And the other big ones is the ability to publish interactive data to the web, right? So I can publish canned reports to the web with some of the lesser tiers. But if I want to actually say, I know we have a lot of government customers on, or healthcare customers and a number of others. If I want to take these reports and make them available to the citizens and let them interact with them and drill down on them, that's where Power BI Premium would come into play. That's a use case that we see often. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kai and let Kai run you through a demo so you can see sort of the 0 to 60 in 15 minutes about how to get going. Welcome, Kai.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will go ahead and take over as presenter here and tee up my screen so that you're able to see that. And we'll go ahead and get started. I will be pretty much, for the most part, walking you through Power BI Desktop with a little bit of the web service so that we can see the publishing features and functionality. But for the most part, I really want to take you through a full-scale tour of what it takes to import data into Power BI, into the desktop application, be that from an Excel spreadsheet or a data source on your on-premise data warehouse and SQL Server, MySQL, Oracle, Amazon Redshift, you name it. We'll walk through some of the data types and we'll have a look at the extensive list of data types, data sources that Microsoft has available to import into Power BI. One caveat on that, the one place that you can create data types, data models, is within the Power BI desktop application. You'll notice, and I'll walk you through it as we get to the web service, the level of interaction then changes and shifts. So I like to kind of term it as your Power BI desktop users, folks who are going to be using this application, are folks who are going to be authoring reports for you. They're the ones who are behind the scenes kind of working with your analysis services, if you've got that, or anything of that nature, creating those data models within Power BI, be they through import or direct query, allowing them to create a data model and model that data, transform it, and then present it in a way that you can kind of slice and dice the data as an end user from the web perspective using the Power BI service. Okay, so what I'll do really quickly, I've got 3 reports here that I kind of put together. Jerry and I were working together yesterday to put together a demo, and I just kind of carried it forward. And I think Jerry sent me over a couple of links and a PDF document and a couple of small pieces of information to put something together that targeted healthcare and how hospitals are scored by state. So I'll just jump onto that webpage really quick so you can see that first. This is Leapfrog Hospital Safety Grade A grade. It's a service that is provided to folks where you can just go to a website, find out how safe your hospital is in your state, just like Bob was talking about, that interactivity piece, being able to search by city and state, search your location. So if I were to put in my own personal zip code and search for hospitals here in Atlanta, it would pull up a list of those hospitals showing their grade A, B, C, or D, and only the ones that are ranked with A grade hospitals are in this list. So this is a static list for the most part that I can go to the web and grab. So as we see at the very top, the rankings here, ranked number 1 is Maine because they had a total of 16 hospitals scored, and out of that 16, 11 of them are A-list hospitals, so that gives them the high percentage of 68%. As we scroll down this list a bit, We see a couple of duplicates. We have 17, two states tied for 17th place with Utah and South Carolina. And then we see down at the bottom of the list my former place of residence, the District of Columbia, that had 7 that were scored, but 0 scored an A-list rating, so they got 0%. So I will go ahead and pull open the finished report, which is this one here, and basically just really quickly go through what this does. As you can see, you have a list of the states on the left-hand side. I can select any state. I can select multiple states, and basically it's going to tell me the ranking, the average percent of the A-list hospitals for that state, a little bit of a breakdown with a column bar chart, the total number of hospitals and hospitals scored, and a little bit of statistics in a table format on the right-hand side here. So how did I build that? Let's go ahead and we'll start this from scratch. And this will give me the opportunity to walk you through the data sources and kind of show you how we can get up to speed and build something just like what's in that report page in about 5 or 10 minutes. So when we open Power BI Desktop, it's a common interface that you're used to. You see the tabs on the bottom for your report pages, just like Excel. So if you're familiar with working with Office applications, this becomes instantly familiar to you. A lot of the functionality, which is what I love about Microsoft, is that they carry a lot of the functionality from application to application. So as people are getting up to speed, it's not like I'm learning how to drive a car all over again. I know these tabs are present in many Microsoft applications, so I'm familiar with the fact that the functionality that I'm looking for on the View tab is related to my page layout, just like it would be in Word, right? So if I go to my Home tab and I go to Get Data, let's talk about Get Data. The most common data sources are listed here, but there are so many more. So if we go ahead and click more, we get a full kind of dictionary of data sources. So we can do anything from the basic file, SharePoint folder, text files in Excel, all the way up to several different flavors of database, SAP, Amazon Redshift, Google BigQuery, which is in beta at present. It's not generally available yet. Several of these you see that are in beta. Microsoft releases a new update to Power BI Desktop, the application, once a month. So every month at the beginning of the month, there is a new update. So that tells you exactly how much they are working, researching, and releasing new features and functionality for this platform. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is click Other, and I'm going to select Web, because that's where this particular data source comes from, and I'm going to grab my URL from my little sticky notepad over here and pop that right into the URL fill, and this is the URL for the page that we were just on. So if I click OK right now, that is going to pull up the navigator, right? And because this is publicly available information, if I click the web view, that's not the right one. Let's get the right one here. Different page. I'm getting ahead of myself. We want this one. So I'll do that one more time. We'll go to web and paste in my URL. Click OK. And now when I go to web view, yes, this is the exact page that we were just looking at, right? So when I look at it in the web view, I will see that page. But if I click on the document, this is a little table that just kind of shows the elements on the page in a table. But what I'm really interested in is this table 0. Because that data is in a table on that page, I am able to access it through Power BI. It can interpret the tags on the page, and it can place that right in a view where I can manipulate it here. So if I select it, I'm able to see and preview it. When I put the check in the box, I have two options. I can load or I can edit it. So when we're looking at these fields, we see that the column headings look pretty accurate. The rank is there. It looks almost exactly the way it did on the web page. But I will tell you in advance, there are always some caveats to data transformation. As something imports from one system to another system, there's always some processes or some checks and balances that we want to go through to make sure that that data comes in as the exact data type that we're expecting, so that when we build our visualizations, we get the results we expect. So I'm going to go ahead and click Edit. That's going to launch my query editor, right? So right now, I already know I want to rename this from table 0 because that's not meaningful for me. So hospital state rankings. A little bit more meaningful, and when I jump out of the query editor, this will make more sense, and you'll be able to see the table, and that will make it so that when you're producing these reports for end users and they know the data set, they can kind of read this in English and go through and not have to look at something that looks like a SQL table with a whole bunch of underscores and other things that might be specific to an application, but this can be in business user language so that they can understand. I can grab this from my employee table, drag and drop this. I want to put this from the state table, and it all makes sense, right? So we see the data types at the very, very top here. Okay, so the rank is a number field. I know that because when I look up at the top, the data type says hold number. If I needed to change that data type, I could. State is a text field, which it should be. Total number of hospitals is also a number field, and we see the percentage sign for percentage of A-ranked hospitals as well. So another thing I usually like to do when I'm working with data sets that involve states, this comes in as a state, but if I wanted to show this in a visual, the long name of a state instead of the state code takes up quite a bit of real estate. So a lot of times what I like to do is import another piece of information. So if I want to grab a news source, and we can use Wikipedia for this, and I'll grab this link, and Wikipedia has a list of state abbreviations, right? So if I say okay, we'll be able to preview this page. So I've got nothing up my sleeves here. I'm not tricking you or anything. Here's the Wikipedia page that has the list of U.S. state abbreviations, right? So same scenario, Power BI is sort of broken down this web page, and when I look at the web view, it's going to show me every place where there's a table on this page for the most part. So I'm looking at table 2, table 3. Okay, so if I go to table view, and I go to codes and abbreviations for states, this looks like sort of like what I want, right? There's a lot of miscellaneous information in here, so this means that I've got a little bit more cleanup to do than I had to do in my previous table that I imported, right? So I'm going to go ahead and put a check in the box here, click OK, and that's going to pull that in. Now, the reason that that didn't say load or edit, because we're already in the query editor, so it knows that there's only one thing to do in the query editor, and this is a place where we do all of our transformation, all our major transformations happen here. I would go ahead and just load that into the editor. So I already know right off the bat, this ISO codes, this column right here, I do not need. There's a bunch of other columns in here I do not need. But what I want to do first is let's talk about sorting and or filtering out data that we don't need. So we see this column heading here says name and status of region 2. It looks like it's just states, federal district, territory for each locality, right? So there's only a few in here that I want. I want the 50 states because if we look at the state hospital rankings here, there's 50 rows for all 50 states, including the District of Columbia. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to filter this. And I'm going to say that I don't want to select all of these, but I want just the states, Commonwealth, federal district. And we'll go ahead and click federal state too, just so we can see what that does. So that narrows down this list, right? Federal district, District of Columbia, states, commonwealths, all included here, right? That's exactly what I want. But federal state, we recognize, is calling out the United States of America. We don't want that. So let's go back. We'll uncheck that. Click OK.
You did federal district, and I think you wanted to do federal state.
Thank you. There we go. Thank you very much. And then I'll go ahead and click OK. That takes that out. So now I've got states, commonwealths, and federal district, which is the District of Columbia, right? So I don't really need this column anymore. and I don't have to keep it in the data set. So I can select just the columns that I want, or I can select all the columns I want to eliminate, right? So if I select this full name, state, and then I go to USPS, hit control, I can say remove other columns, right? So now that those two are selected, I can remove the other columns. It will narrow that down to just the two. I could have done the reverse, which would be to select all the columns I don't want, click this same button here and click remove columns, and that would have removed all of the ones I didn't want. So you have that option there. So right away I know I'm going to rename these. This is state name, and right clicking here, rename state code. All right. So that looks pretty good. So now I've got a list of all of the states that I want, right? Okay, so we're going to go ahead, and this would be great. This would be perfectly fine if I were to just pause here, close and apply was what allows me to apply my transformation, but that's not exactly what I want to do. I would rather take and try to create a relationship between this column state here and this state name here, okay? So I could do that in two ways. I could go into the relationship tab and I could create a relationship, and that would join the two tables based on the commonality of that state and state name. But the best way to do this and to kind of narrow this down is to go ahead and merge these two tables. So I'll do a merge queries. I'll select state name here at the top. I'll select my codes and abbreviations for US states. Select that. It matched the 50 out of 50. I click OK. So what that does is that creates a link to the table that I just joined it to. And if I click on that, I will see that the state of Maine matches up to the state code of ME, but that's not exactly what I want. I've created the link, but here's what I really want to do. I want to bring this column into my primary data table, right? So I'm going to click on the double-headed arrow up here in the corner here, and I'm going to select clear the checkbox for select all columns and select just that state code. And I can use the original column as a prefix, which is fine. I'm going to rename it anyway. I'll click OK, and that brings all of those state codes into my primary table.
And while you're renaming that for a second, Kai, I think the thing that's important for everybody to understand here, right, is that, so this is obviously a pretty simple example, but we're sort of showing you that you could take two totally unrelated things, from data source perspective, and relate them together to give you a better report, right? So you can take data that exists in your organization, go out to some publicly available data that can help you look or think about it differently, combine them and make, more intuitive reports, right? And I think that's the main takeaway here.
All right, great. Thanks, Bob. So here we have now, I've sorted it by rank. So now we see that exact same table that we saw on the site, but now we have the state code here. The percentages look right, and we're going to show you some things that we can also keep an eye out for when it comes to percentages, numbers, whole numbers, and decimals in just a second. So when I'm done with my transformations, as you notice, there's the applied steps that are happening here. If I step back and step back and step back through this, it will step back just like you would if you were using Photoshop, and the history within Photoshop allows you to kind of step back in a timeline of every step that you've applied. So if I step up to the last step that I created, so I can also delete these. It's best to delete them in order, because if there's any step in here that's dependent upon another one, like if I were to go up here and there was something down here that was dependent, I could break my cycle, right? I could break it because there's something further down the chain that's dependent on that piece. So that's always good to know, okay? I won't get into talking too much about the M queries in the query editor, going into advanced editor. It's definitely for a 201. So we'll hit close and apply. And that brings in hospital state rankings and the codes and abbreviations for U.S. states. Okay, so now we have this table. If we go into the data sheet view, which is over on the far left stand. This is the grid here. And if we notice, when I said earlier that I created this relationship, when I did that merge queries, it did this for me. So I didn't have to step out and do that in here and have a lookup. I not only got the column, but it also created the relationship as well, because now these two things are named the same. So it creates the relationship there. There's some intuitive things happening behind the scenes with Power BI all the time. So some of those are wanted and some of those are not, such as, now when you look at my percentage, why does it look like 0.688 instead of 68.8%, right? So this is another anomaly that we have to run into when we're talking about transforming data. When we looked at it in the query editor, it looked correct. So to fix that, we'll go up to the modeling tab. We've already selected the column, and we notice that the format is general. Well, this is not a general. It shouldn't be format general. It should be formatted as a percentage. So as soon as I change that, we'll see that that changes right to what it's supposed to be. I can drop a decimal place here, and then I get my 68.8, right? Okay, so we're all set with that. Over here on this side, we'll look at properties. The default summarization is sum. Most times in percentages, we want averages, so we can change this if we're looking to total this in any kind of table visualization that we put onto our report page. And when we look at our codes, we see that everything looks good. Everything looks okay for our percentages. Our numbers are looking right. We've got our state code merged in, and we are ready to go ahead and start putting some of these visuals on the page. So usually I like to start from left to right. We'll go ahead and add in our slicer for state. So basically on the report page, it's a blank canvas. The reason you see these dots and squares here is based on the fact that I have grid lines and snapped objects to grid selected. It's just like any other authoring application that allows you to drag and drop visualizations or images onto a grid. They will snap into place rather than me having to do a lot of tinkering to position them. This is always helpful to have these on snapped objects to grid and show grid lines. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and insert my first visual, which is usually my slicer. So I put the slicer on the page. In the visualizations pane, you see all of the out-of-the-box visualizations that come with Power BI. Everything from mapping tools to columns, stack column charts, line and bar charts, you name it. And then anything that there isn't, that we don't have listed here, can be obtained by going to the Office store. So if I click here really quickly, we'll see the Power BI custom visuals open right within the application that allow me to browse other types of visuals that I can import into my PBIX file. Okay, and they're all sorted by category. This is a recent add to this application. Now, instead of having to go to the store, the Office store, remember the URL, download it, and then import it, I can do it right from within the application, and I can search for them. They have suggested a list of suggested ones for me as well. So we'll go ahead and click back on my visual. And now when I'm ready to put in information here, I can just drag a column. I can drag state right into the column for that slicer visual and go ahead and begin working with that. So that shows me a list of my states, right? I have two options here. I can either make this a list or I can make it a drop down. Depending on the report I'm building, and this goes into a graphical design or type of visualization layout kind of principles, I want to take up as much real estate with things that I'm using to filter the page as possible. So some folks want to see a list of the states, all of the states. Some would prefer to just have the slicer with a drop down so that they can scroll through so that they have more room on the page for other visuals, right? So if I go back here, I'm going to go ahead now and jump into inserting my map visualization. Now, as long as that's selected, if I click another visual, it will change this visual. So I know that I always have to click off and click onto the canvas somewhere, and then I will go ahead and add in my map. Okay, so that adds in the map, and we're not doing anything too fancy yet. We'll go ahead and put in state as location. And Power BI automatically knows that when I put in state, even though I have not categorized this as a geolocation, normally when I would put in state or any type of address information in the modeling piece, you can go ahead and tell Power BI, hey, this is an address, this is a zip code. These are all helpful, and as you see, this is a Bing map here, helpful for geolocation. If you have lat longitude in your data sets, you can also use that, which gives you a way better accuracy and pinpoint accuracy as far as drilling through or being able to display items on a map, right? So we have three different kinds of maps in Power BI. We have the standard map, we have a filled map, and we have a shape map, okay? So if I click on the shape map, that's just going to give me a map of the 50 states, right? So in the visualizations right under this pane, you'll see that there's three options here. One is for adding my fields based on the type of visualization I'm using, right? The other is formatting, right? So if I want to format this in any way, and we'll get to that in just a second, I can format that, change colors, change the size, put borders on it, things of that nature from that piece there. So now we're going to, at its basic level, talk about the interactivity that we have with just these two pieces, two visualizations on the page. When I select Alaska, it's gonna highlight Alaska. When I select California, it's gonna highlight California. I'm only able to select one at a time though. So if I want to select multiple items, I would select my slicer visual. I'd go to the format control and see how it says here single select is on. We want to turn that off. Okay, so once we turn that off, this is going to allow me to select multiple states, and we'll see where this applies when it comes to wanting to aggregate data over different locations. What does it look like for the whole upper Northwest? What does it look like for the Mid-Atlantic? This is what allows you to have that functionality if you're not already kind of grouping and or bucketizing some of your information from your data set level. Okay. All right, so now our next one is to add our stacked bar chart at the bottom here that we have. So we're going to go ahead and grab that visual. I'll click onto a blank part of the canvas here, drag it out so it's almost approximately the size. So we're looking for total number of A-scored hospitals and total number of hospitals scored in this. Okay. So now what I need to do is I need to adjust the y-axis here so that when we look at this, it's not going to go all the way to 3000K percentage. So let me look at this for just 1 second. And we're getting a sum of both of those. So now I go back to here and we'll look at that. All right, but we'll go ahead and select California, and it allows us to see the percentage of hospitals scored. And I'm going to turn on some labeling here. Data labels, we'll turn those on. That gives me my numbers. And then we will really quickly, we'll start. And one other thing I want to do with that. And then my axis, right? So let's jump back here, and then we can add in the information that we need to make this so that we'll have both of those appear on our page. So if we look here, right, so basically what we're trying to achieve here is we're going to try to get this to show the number of hospitals scored versus the number of A-list hospitals. And I'm missing a small step here that's preventing me from being able to see these stacked the way they should be. So I've got that right. So let's clear my filter here.
Don't you need the number of total hospitals and the total A hospitals instead of the percentage?
Right.
Thanks, Shelly. So Kai, because we're running a little bit long on what we promised them, why don't we just kind of flip back? I think we got a really good sense, because you've been really great at sort of walking everybody through step by step.
Sure.
Why don't we flip to the finished product and sort of just walk them through how the things are correlated and multi-selecting and stuff,
Sure.
and then wrap it up.
No problem. No problem. Sounds good. All right. So this one, we'll figure out why that's not working. So basically what I have here on the left-hand side, the only thing I didn't touch on was the ranking and how I got that, and wanted to kind of introduce you to what measures look like in Power BI. Power BI measures come from Power Query, which was an Excel component that was usually used for analysis services, right? So they put that into Excel. Power Query gave birth to Power BI. So DAX is the language that we're using to create our formulas, and they're very Excel looking, right? So in order to get this ranking, we have California selected, right? And we know California is ranked number 28. This is a visual called a card. So what we have here is if there's a value selected, if has one value from my state selector here, the slicer, we want to show the max value for state rankings, the hospital state rankings, which there's only one, so it's going to show the max, and that's that. If were to go up here and select another state, just for instance, right, it's going to average those three. So if I were to jump over here and add the rank column to this visual here, just so we can see it and we can see the numbers, right, it's going to average these three numbers together. So that if statement basically put that right onto a card just like it is now, is basically dictating how that works. So we have if there is one value, then we'll use the max. So that means one state selected. If not, then we're going to average the three as a total and give you a total number. So I'll go ahead and deselect that. And if that's the reason why, I don't know, the $1 million question probably for me to close out would be, how come it shows the ranking 25 if there's nothing selected, right? So you remember that this said averages, right? There are a total of 50 states, and the total number sum for rank is 1264. So if you do the quick math, the average of that number divided by 50 is 25. So that's the reason for that. There's a way to suppress that so that nothing shows that if you have a state don't have anything selected. A message, you can prompt a message here that says select a state. There's so many things and functionality that you can get to and do with Power BI. I wish I had an entire hour to talk to you about it, but I'll defer to Bob, and we can jump right into any questions that anybody might have.
Yeah. So just a couple of things to finish up, and then we'll open the floor to questions. So just give me 1 second.
Sure.
Let me take back over.
And if you want, and if we have the time to walk through what we missed out on the whole piece of going through the web service and publishing, but I'm happy to do that as well.
Yeah. So and if we have questions, somebody wants to see that, I'm happy to take that as a question on the follow-up, and we can go there. But I just wanted to make sure that we stuck to the time for those that wanted to.
Sure.
So just a quick thing. So we do have some sort of packaged offerings around this at Planet. So obviously, you guys are welcome to take this, say, this looks really easy, and I'm happy to do it. But we also have some quick starts, right? The idea, the great thing about Power BI is what we're not looking to do is, say, hey, we're going to put a team of consultants on your, at your location for a year, and we're going to do all these things for you. What we're looking to do is to say, hey, look, let's get some things set up. Let's talk about some of the key data sources that you have. Let's get them connected. Let me walk you through in a little more depth about some of the things we just did, and target a 2 to 5 reports or so and a dashboard or two, and then get you guys ready to go and turn it over to you and let you run with it. That's the idea. That's the power of Power BI. Sorry, pardon the pun. And so we have those depending on the size and scope of the data and the type of reports. It's a 1 or 2 week fixed fee sort of, relatively speaking, engagement. We've been very, very successful in getting customers up and running on Power BI in a week or two, depending on what they're looking to do. And they've run with it and had many, many successful subsequent reports. I just want to make sure you guys are aware that that exists. One last bit, just to give you guys a reminder, if you haven't already received an invitation to the Office 365 Summit, or even if you have and you haven't thought about it, it's a virtual summit, so I know many of our customers can't really travel, certainly not from long distance. I know we have people from all over the U.S. on this call. If you go out to www.o365summit.com, you can register for the event. It's a virtual summit. There's a number of, I'll make sure that everyone has an invitation. I think everyone on this call who's invited to this call has already had one. We'll make sure another one goes out for sure, to talk about the various topics. But again, they're a short presentation with an open panel discussion about a lot of the key ongoing topics for Office 365 that cover net new stuff, ongoing operational challenges and governance and security challenges, and all of those. Just a lot of great topics and a lot of great panels. So with that, we'll turn it over to questions. Are there any questions out there? So happy to have them typed in. You guys are happy. You're all available to unmute your mics and ask questions if you like. Just Kai, just for just to get things kickstarted, what are some other types of examples of some Power BI projects we've done for customers, and some of the types of data we've been able to correlate?
We worked with Arvada Fire Department, who's in Colorado. They were pretty challenging because they are dealing basically with time, date and time, like down to the second. So they wanted to aggregate and find out what their response times were from the time that a call gets dispatched to the time that the first unit is on scene. And being that my background is, I was a paramedic EMT for a very long time, so I was very familiar with protocols and whatnot. But taking that data and massaging it from their EMS system into Power BI, and then having to break out date and time separately and make it so that we could do some KPIs on their data was a challenge, but we definitely measured up to it, and they're very, very happy with the end product because now they can take their data from their EMS system and then analyze that on the back end. And I think that their plans were to move their structure somewhat into an Azure data warehouse so that they could refresh that on a regular basis and get like close to real-time reports as to their response rate.
Excellent. And how long did a project like that take, for instance?
Oh, wow. That one it was just basically a proof of concept. It was about 3 weeks.
Right.
From start to finish. And their data was very, very clean. It was in great shape and pretty much ready to go. All I had to do was really build the measures and work really deeply within Power BI to make it the visualizations stand out the way they needed them to.
So, but that's a great example of very powerful, impactful, and potentially available, for our government customers that are on super impactful constituent-based data as well, right? To say, hey, let me tell you how quickly we're responding to calls and publish that out to the internet, whatever. Some very impactful reports in just a couple of weeks, right? So again, this is not, bringing in, one of the big consulting firms and 6 months later you talk about what you might want to do. This is actually getting your data available to be drilled into in a very fast time. Any other questions out there, including, by the way, like I said, this is an open community call. So welcome questions that are not necessarily on the topic of Power BI as well. That's always welcome on this call. So anybody have any questions or concerns, or if there are any customers that are using Power BI and want to talk about what they're doing, that would be great as well. So so it doesn't sound like we necessarily have any questions, but real quick, Kai, if you want to, do you want to sort of show the what a dashboard and some of those things look like? Because we didn't get a chance to show that in the demo.
Sure, absolutely. Let me go ahead and share my desktop, and we can walk through the
Sort of the end user view of what this looks like
web
once it's
service.
right. What is published. Yeah.
That we had earlier, I was not counting correctly. So when we go to the web service, if we look at that same uh, data set that I had that's been published to the web now, you'll see that I have three things here. I have the data set, the report, and then dashboard. So if you think of what comes first in the chicken or the egg, it comes the data set. We build the reports, right, and we can add pages to the reports, but the dashboards basically come from reports. So if I wanted to pin this to a dashboard, I would pin the visual, create a new dashboard, right? By clicking here and give it a name, hospital, state ranking, and click pin, and that's going to pin that to a dashboard. And I could pin a number of these visuals. I could go ahead and pin the table that I have here. I want to deselect that first. But I can go ahead and pin that to the very same dashboard. So I click OK and click pin. So now I have those two visuals there, and I can build out a dashboard based on several pages of a report. So it wouldn't just have to be this isolated, just this single page, but I could use any page in my report where there's relevant data where I want to see it all collected together in a dashboard. So I'll show you one that I already have. So we see the two visuals that we posted, that we pinned from that page. But if we look at my human resources sample or any of the other samples that we have here, these are all kind of interactive. You have a choice though. You can pin a live page, which is pinning a whole page report, which is interactive, or you can pin individual visualizations. And when I click on any of these visualizations, they're going to go right into the report page. That's the difference there. So two options, like I said, that you can pin a live page. So if I were to go to this page in human resources, the human resources sample here, I could go to this option here and that would pin the live page as a dashboard, and it would be interactive right from that spot, right? So the other thing that I want to show you is on publishing. When I publish from Power BI, and once it's a part of the web service, from the data set, I have a couple of different options as far as refresh is concerned. So right now, I have one data set in here that refreshes from Azure, right? So this is my Azure database. I provided the credentials, and it will refresh based on whatever schedule that I create, daily or weekly. I believe because this is Power BI Pro is our license level, so we can refresh it weekly, daily, and based on this day schedule. We can add other times as well. We can send refresh and failure notifications to a person as well. So that's for that. Now, the one that I was working on before, you notice I don't have any data sources because this came from the web. But if I were to take that information and save it to an Excel spreadsheet and place it on OneDrive for Business, then that becomes a web data source, and that's refreshable, right? So I'd be able to refresh on that if it was a data source either there in Azure or some other cloud-based storage. We can set a refresh schedule on.
Great. Thank you very much. So are there, before we wrap up, any last questions from the audience? Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us this week. Hopefully this was useful. I will send out the presentation to everyone as a follow-up, as well as those that are still on, you can actually download the presentation yourself if you want to as well. I want to thank everyone again for joining, and we'll see you next month. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Kai.
Thank you.